This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Doc and Jock Wrestling Podcast. This is episode 180. On today's show, a big Impact star maybe signing with AEW. Sounds like the contract's on the table. It just has to be completed, as well as some big moving abouts in the back of WWE. And this one person has a brand new position. It's really, really interesting what he gets to do. And we've got to talk about what's going on with John Cena putting over this guy, saying he is the hardest worker in WWE. We're going to get into all of that. Of course, we got to take a look at AEW, Impact, NXT, SmackDown, Raw. We also got to talk about the Doc's trip to the Thunderdome. And speaking of the Doc, he's the guy who does it with me always. He's the one. He's the only. He is the Doc John Macaroon. Cuz, how was the Thunderdome? What was it like?
It was crazy. It's not instant. That's the part I didn't understand is you got to get in there, and then all of a sudden the first go around they're like, it's full. And I'm like, oh, I registered. I just don't get to slide in and get on the screen. So I waited like 3 minutes. Then boom, all of a sudden you start seeing the feed. I was a little disappointed in that you just watched like a TV feed, but you know, it is what it is. It's technology. I was hoping maybe like just a camera, you can kind of see a little of a different vantage point, but it was sweet that you have a guy talking. He's like, cheer, do this, big excitement, commercial. And I got a sense early on just based on my movements, things like that. I'm like, wait a minute, I think I can see myself. And I was in the front row of the Thunderdome. It's a smooth, easy experience. It was fun. I was just moving my hands all over the place. It was cool to see. You're like in it, you know, basically in a fan in your own personal seat, just reacting to a show. So I got to watch the segment with Alexa Bliss, the match with it was Monday Night Raw, the match with Charlotte coming down, and I got to see the main event, which was cool from that vantage point, which was Drew McIntyre taking on the big man Braun Strowman. So all in all, it's a great, easy experience. It's just not like where you push a button and you join. You got to sit there and wait and everything like that. But they give you perfect instructions with the camera. Test this. And now being that I understand video and camera, have a good camera, was wearing the NWO shirt, and they put me in the front row. So it was cool. Another thing checked off the list in the experience category of something interesting that I was part of the Thunderdome. And despite what anyone thinks, I now have a little video montage of my face forever on the Peacock network. And hopefully when they get everything situated with Raw and all the pay-per-views, I have my little spot in a couple places in the annals of WWE history. It was fun, but is it worth it? It's a little bit of a work labor experience all in all. So one and done. Could be potentially doing it again on Raw. We'll see. But it's fun. It's just something to do, and you get to watch the show and interact. But by and large, I was amped up. So I was all into it. That last hour, I was into it, and then the anticipation of doing it. So maybe I had a different vantage point, but a lot of people felt like this Monday Night Raw really shit the bed and wasn't that good.
Yeah, it wasn't a great Raw. I do want to talk to you a little bit more about your Thunderdome experience, though, because Brian Alvarez of Wrestling Observer was talking about a situation that they had with Rhea Ripley. So she took place in that 6-man tag, or that 6-woman tag, I should say. And she was obviously on the heel side of things. And when she was wrestling, I was like, oh, okay. Like out loud, I said, oh, okay. She's acting like a heel. But according to Brian Alvarez, you guys get coached when you're in the Thunderdome. They're basically telling you what they want you to do. Like they want you to cheer here. They want you to boo here, right?
Absolutely. Yep. There's a guy saying big when I believe Braun Strowman had Drew McIntyre up. He's like, it's going to be a big spot, guys. Make sure you're loud as can be. So stuff like that. And it's kind of like you felt like you were getting produced.
Interesting, because when Rhea Ripley was in the ring, they were telling everybody in the Thunderdome, according to Brian Alvarez, to cheer for her. Mind you, she's out there and she's doing heel tactics. She's acting like everything she did in the ring, like I said, made me say out loud that she's a heel. But the producers were telling people in the Thunderdome to cheer her like she was a face. And I think this is where sometimes the message is really unclear with WWE. And I think this is what kind of leads to bad Monday Night Raws, is you just don't know necessarily who you're rooting for. Generally speaking, you're going to root for faces over heels. There's a reason that you're a heel. Heels are there to be disliked. And with WWE, I don't even think they know what they're doing with their wrestlers. And I think that's a prime example if that story's true. And generally everything Brian Alvarez ever says is pretty accurate. So I'm going to take it with all the justification in the world that WWE creative, WWE producers don't really know what they're doing with the wrestlers. And that is leading to one, slipping ratings with Raw, and two, something that you just brought up, really bad shows. And we had another one. I thought, for me, the only bright spot was the highlight with RK Bro. And I thought Drew McIntyre and Braun Strowman did a hell of a job in their match. But I thought RK Bro, as stupid as it was, I laughed out loud probably 6 times through that entire thing from the start of the iteration of them in the back in the backstage area to Randy Orton leaving the ring, and you've got Matt Riddle standing up on the ring post being like, bro, like I probably laughed 6 times. I thought that was absolutely fantastic. And I thought that was great. It was stupid. It was dumb, but it was good and it was funny. And Drew McIntyre, I think he tried his damnedest to save another shitty Raw.
Yeah, that's what I said. And there was also the creation of an intriguing storyline with RK Bro. So, and then the main event I thought delivered. I thought the third hour was really interesting and intriguing with Alexa Bliss. So I could see where, from your vantage point, it looks like that, but it's been clearly established where they've kind of murkied and muddied the waters in regards to heels and faces and things like that. Mm-hmm. They don't care as long as you make noise. And it was true. Yeah, they said cheer, excited, but get excited. It basically was like, make noise. Don't just sit there. And I think maybe that's why I got the opportunity, because I was flailing my hands all over the place. I was screaming into the thing. Over. Yeah, and I was just trying to do what they said. And it comes across like, what are you doing? You look like you're having a seizure on TV. But it's like they said, be active, be engaged, make noise. I don't think they care really in regards to, and because here's the thing that's crazy, is that I think WWE is just willing to take all the heat because they say, we sold our show to Fox for $1 billion. We sold our network for another $1 billion. You know, where we got TV deals that are, you know, secure and things like that. Now, will this impact what they could get next time? Absolutely. But I think they're in this transition period where they're trying to marinate on a couple of stars, like you said, Bianca Belair and Rhea Ripley. And what, as a society where we're at, we're like, now. But you've seen the culmination and the marination of a couple new stars. They're trying to build them. But the problem that we all see is they're putting a cap on the star. They're not letting them become transcendent Steve Austin types, because then you got to pay them more. And in this day and age, they're like, we're a product, we're a show, take it or leave it. We know you're watching, and we're going to just really enjoy the 1.5 million people that keep watching every week, and then we're just going to keep going because of the fact that they keep churning out these massive deals. Now, in the end, is there growth? And Eric Bischoff in a recent interview said it. He said, and Vince Russo said it, they said, in the heyday, how can we say the wrestling business is strong when back in the Attitude Era we were drawing a 5 rating, now you're drawing a 1.5, and you're telling me this is great and this is getting $1 billion deals? He goes, no, it makes no sense. The name of the game is ratings, and if you want to go back to character development, storyline, all that kind of stuff, the problem is you're not giving the people enough of what they want more oftentimes. It doesn't make any sense. 50-50 booking, shows that don't deliver, shows that are boring, angles that go on way too long, Sami Zayn versus Kevin Owens for 600 times. Stuff like that makes no sense, where you're seeing in other promotions the elevation of new stars, the different look. And it's this. The WWE is too neat. They are too much now like a movie, and they need to kind of scale it back just a little bit with the production, not to the point where you look like a bingo hall, but slow it down a little bit on all these camera cuts, create some stars, let some angles flush out, let some new blood in, do some new things that are edgy, and, you know, really just kind of refresh the brand. It needs like a new coat of paint. And that's where everybody's looking at it. It's like, oh, this is dragging, this is boring, you know. And like you said, you and I said it, we played it out. We're like, okay, what are they going to do? They're going to have the RK Bro go on, and they won't even win the title. They'll just, Randy Orton's going to give them an RKO next week. You know, we don't feel like we're going to get the proper trajectory of these stories. So I get where you're saying regarding Raw and the nature of the show, but once you kind of just say fuck it and stop analyzing it that way, and you say, hey, let's just take a sample of the two biggest things that you see. If you can fast forward and not watch it for 3 hours, you get something good out of it. But yeah, it's not ideal, it's not prime, and it's not thriving. Basically, they're flatlining, and it's just WWE, and that's what it is. Whereas you and I are always looking like, how do you do better? How do you grow this? Who's the next star? Who's the next champion? What's the champion doing? But by and large, they're not optimal in any area. They're just B- in every area of the game. But because in the big world of money and entertainment, B- product gets you $2 billion in 2 years. So how are you gonna argue with Vince and be like, he's gonna sit across from you and be like, my characters draw me money, and that's what he's looking to do.
And I agree with that, and I think that's been Vince's staple since day one. But you brought something up, and you kind of touched on it just a little bit. Because we've seen this before with other variations of WWE, where they have this ebb and flow with having really solid, strong characters, and then just having guys who feel like they should be on Sunday Night Heat, and those are the guys who are kind of carrying the torch. And I feel like with WWE, I think you brought something up. They are working with future stars like Bianca Belair. She's got it. Rhea Ripley. She's got it. You know, as far as the guys go, I like Adam Cole has it, but I don't know if Adam Cole will ever be one of those like super transcendent guys. Maybe he will. He's in NXT right now. He's not even on Raw. On the red and blue brands, there really isn't anybody who you're like, that guy's going to be freaking amazing. So I do think what you might be seeing, and I think you brought this up, and this is what got me thinking about this while you were talking. They might be one of those low points where they're trying to accumulate some of that high bar talent. Bianca Belair, Rhea Ripley, guys like when you had Stone Cold Steve Austin, you had Chris Jericho operating at his prime in matches with Shawn Michaels. You had Stone Cold Steve Austin. You had The Rock. You had these big name guys who could headline anything, and you had multiple of them. It could be that they're working on getting back to that. The problem is Vince seen what happened when Stone Cold was his main draw. Stone Cold got hurt, and he had to find a new star, and he had trouble creating a new star. So he likes to keep everybody kind of, like you said, almost midline, almost flatlined just before they break through that glass ceiling and just before they can take over. And that really sucks because the product that we get is essentially a lot of the same things. It's a lot of regurgitated storylines. It's a lot of guys who you're like, yeah, I'm kind of into that person, but you're like not into that person. The way I know that I'm really into a wrestler is if I'm willing to go out and buy your merch. Because how often do you wear a wrestling shirt? Like you wore your NWO shirt because you were in the Thunderdome. Unless you're really going to a WWE or an AEW or an indie show, you're probably not wearing your wrestling gear around to many, many places. At least I'm not. So I know if I'm buying in to your character, like I own an EC3 t-shirt. Like I told you I loved him and I thought he was great in Impact, but I own an EC3 t-shirt. And like before that, I owned a Hulk Hogan WCW t-shirt. You know what I'm saying? It's like, if I'm really into your character, I'll buy your merch. And that's how I know. Right now, there's hardly anybody whose stuff I'm willing to buy. Like I'm willing to part with $20 of my own to wear a t-shirt of yours. And it's just kind of where I think the product is. And I think that's a telling statement of what's going on with the industry and what's going on with not just Monday Night Raw, but SmackDown as well. And on SmackDown, I thought we had one of the best matches in such a long, long time. It was the main event. It ends up with Daniel Bryan leaving WWE. It was a career versus title match between Daniel Bryan and Roman Reigns. Bryan ends up losing to Reigns, so now he has to leave WWE. Or is it just SmackDown? What do you think happens to Daniel Bryan going forward? Because I think you could make an argument he could just leave SmackDown. Now remember, we brought up last week that his contract's almost up. He's working on a very limited time here before he'll be working either A, without a contract, or they have to re-up him. So this could be his swan song, or what I think will probably happen. Again, Raw's been really, really piss poor lately. Like really, really bad. I think Daniel Bryan goes to Monday Night Raw and infuses some talent over there. And I think it's probably the best thing for the Red brand, especially if you can only get 2, maybe 3 months out of him before he actually retires or he goes to someplace else, because we're just not sure what's going on with his contract at this moment. What do you think happens to Daniel Bryan going forward, though?
See, it clears the way for Cesaro to be the hero. But again, I wrote it differently. In my mind, I had a secret vision for how this was going to go, and I was excited to see potentially if it was going to play out. You have, last week prior to this week's show, you have Cesaro having an opportunity, and all of a sudden Daniel Bryan slides in, and he's like, cool, that's my friend. Well, why not, in this perfect scenario, have it where Cesaro turns on Daniel Bryan and joins a faction with people that obviously like him? Wouldn't it have been great? You turn Cesaro heel. He becomes one of the baddest heels in the company. You now have head of the table with Cesaro, Roman Reigns, and Paul Heyman. I thought that would have generated so much heat, so much, oh my gosh, where you have Daniel Bryan so close to winning the title, and Cesaro's just like, yeah, walk in, take my spot. What kind of competitor does that? Now Daniel Bryan leaves, and then now, obviously, you kick off the feud where after the match, Roman Reigns grabs a chair and does his thing, and Cesaro has to run in and blitz Reigns and get it going. And then, of course, Jey Uso has to step in with a super kick. So it's fine. It was a brilliant match. It was an epic pay-per-view style match. But again, are you optimally generating the heat? Are you telling different type of stories? No, you just told the same story. Daniel Bryan loses again. He's got to leave from one brand. Okay, maybe he's going to take some time off. I think he should take some time off, figure it out, show up on Raw, and then probably get thrown into another feud with The Miz, where it'll be the ninth reincarnation of that feud. So that's what it is that you don't get fresh, neat ideas that play off of the storylines you've created. I like your story. I loved it. I loved it too.
I think that would be, it'd be interesting.
I thought it was going to happen. I thought maybe 30% that they're like, okay, Cesaro's standing there. He's just going to let him take the opportunity. But no, they're going into the natural feud this way. I thought they could have just kept it where Daniel Bryan's like, no, my career's not on the line because of the fact that I got screwed, and you have all this, you played out some intrigue. But that's what they did. It was an amazing match, and it was just, it makes up for it. But it's just storylines that aren't intriguing as much as they could be. A++ wasn't there. It's good. B, you got Cesaro, Roman Reigns, great. And Jey Uso's just going to keep rescuing and coming to save Roman Reigns.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're kind of seeing some of that thought process and some of that cookie cutter, I don't know, storytelling, I guess probably the best way to describe it. You're seeing a little bit of that, I think, now with NXT as well, because we've got Adam Cole and we've got Kyle O'Reilly. And what we got on NXT, I thought NXT was a good show. Like, out of the 3 brands, I thought it was obviously the best. But Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, this match I thought was done. I thought we were able to move on. Kyle O'Reilly comes out last week, cuts his weird promo. It's a new Kyle O'Reilly, whatever. It's great. Adam Cole does a sit-down interview and basically cuts a promo where he's still the same old Adam Cole, and it just doesn't seem like this storyline's going to end, because as they basically, it was some good editing by WWE. WWE does a great job with their video production. It was some good editing as they basically zoom out. You come into a room where Kyle O'Reilly's watching Adam Cole's promo on a TV, and I'm just like, damn it. Like, I just want these guys to move on from each other. Like, you don't need 2 wrestlers to be synonymous with each other all the time. Like, when you think of Stone Cold, you don't necessarily think of The Rock. You just don't. You know, you can have wrestlers be by themselves. It's okay. You don't need to think of Adam Cole. You don't need to think of Kyle O'Reilly. And I think that's where we're headed with this new storyline in NXT. And to me, it feels like a lot of the same old WWE BS. And I'm done with this storyline. Are you done with it? Should this continue? Do you need to have a match where it is this blood and guts, and it is the finale? It is almost like the 4th of July, and it is 10:27, and you got about 3 minutes left before you got to stop your fireworks, and you know what? You load up for the big gusto that goes for the next 3 minutes straight. Do you need to have that big finale match? Didn't we just get that?
Yeah, next week it's going to be Adam Cole in a match with special guest referee Kyle O'Reilly. And then the week after that, it's going to be a Kyle O'Reilly match with special guest referee Adam Cole. And then the following week, we're going to have a cage match. And then in 2 weeks, they're going to hug it out, be a tag team again. And then they're going to lose. And then they're going to break up again. You know, you're absolutely right. It's time to move forward. But when you don't have the clear-cut direction, when you don't maybe have 3 months in advance of what you need to do, this is what you get. Time to freshen it up, guys. Let's go.
Yeah, it's time to. You need to hit the reset button on a couple of things, right? And I thought they did a good job with that, with their takeover pay-per-view. But all that being said, I still feel kind of like we're getting some of the same storylines crammed down our throat. Now, something that was brand new took place on Sunday in Impact, and Kenny Omega defeats Rich Swan. Now, to say that neither one of us are surprised would probably be an understatement. But I do think the match was interesting. I did watch this match. I tuned in specifically for this match. I thought it was good. I think I don't want to say they listened to us because Don Callis is a pretty smart wrestling mind. But what I think you had here was they understood how they had to protect Impact, but at the same point, get the storyline with Kenny Omega over.
Yes.
This match had a ton of near falls.
Yes, exactly.
It seemed like at one point, Rich Swan might have been able to win the whole damn thing. It took a minute for Kenny Omega to get the one-winged angel done to Rich Swan. It took forever. It was a bunch of V-triggers. Rich Swan did a great job. There was a point where he was tangled up in the ropes, and there was this V-trigger by Kenny Omega, and he's just spitting spit out, and he's just eyes are rolled back in his head. And it was a great visual showing how much, no pun intended, impact he's just taken. But that leads us to this, because we talked about this. We talked about this relationship between these two wrestling brands. And it's really weird to see another brand's wrestler holding your championship title. What has to happen going forward? How does Kenny Omega make Impact stronger? Because now as the Impact champion, that's your job. As much as you're the AEW champion and the AAA champion, you now have to make Impact stronger. Whether it's by you putting somebody else over when you drop the belts, or whether it's matches that you have with some of these guys. You've got to be able to draw viewers in, and you've got to be able to take people on a story, in a ride. And how does Kenny Omega do that?
Easy,
Basically,
bro.
moonlighting.
Yes, moonlight until the big new star gets a little bit more experience under the belt, and then he gets the title. They got their champion. It's obvious. William Morrissey is in Impact. The debut, everybody was talking about it. You have the guy. If they're wise, they set Kenny Omega up. Maybe you get one intermediary feud with the next person, whoever it may be that you feel like needs a little bit of love from Kenny Omega. He gets it for 30 more days, 60 more days. And then William Morrissey just gets tired of this, and then he's ready for the shot. He is the part. Dude, he's ripped. He's ready. You don't bring him in, have a 7-foot monster, 34 years old in his prime, to be some guy that just stands there in 6-man tags. You elevate him right to the moon, and you shock the wrestling world, and you put the rocket ship on his back, and you have him go over against Kenny Omega. Money's there. It's going to happen, and this is how you elevate a star. You don't lose the rocket ship that's going to be placed on Kenny Omega as he goes back to AEW. You have to make a star. You have one. Now you got to delicately weave that storyline where the conclusion is William Morrissey's got to be your champion, and he's got to pin Kenny Omega 1, 2, 3. It's a great story. You get so much attention. After the match, you have Enzo come in, and you just say, and you can't teach that, or you have some phrase new that's fresh, and you just have the culmination of a new star being made, and hopefully he stays off the bottle and keeps his mind right, because you have a star. He looks the part. He is the part. He's got that, he just looks like he's the best guy in the company, and he's getting pushed. Got a couple victories already with the assistance of Eric Young in that stable. It's time. Make a star quickly. You don't have to marinate him. It's Cass. Give him the belt, and this is how you do it. The only way to do it, if it's not Cass, if it's not William Morrissey, you just got to pick somebody that you're going to put a rocket ship to. I could be wrong, but that's the guy. I mean, he headlined the Impact show, and that was the biggest thing on there. When you see him, you're like, oh, he debuted. Sweet, this is amazing. He outshadows Eddie Edwards, Sami Callihan, Brian Myers, and Matt Cardona. He looks the part, so give him the belt. If I'm the booker,
so he shows up. And this is your guy now. This is the one. He is the handpicked, chosen guy who will basically dethrone Kenny Omega.
Yes. Don't you think? Don't you think that'd be great? He's believable. He's got the mint of WWE, the story of a guy that's worked so hard.
I think he has the average fan's attention because of where he came from. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, right? I think it's something similar to a guy like Rich Swann, right? The average fan knows who Rich Swann is because of WWE. The average fan knows who Big Cass is because of WWE. The problem is, and the only issue I would have with that is I would be nervous about putting the belt on him because at times he has proven to be very unstable and he has proven to be very divisive in that locker room, and he has proven to sometimes have issues, and that was what basically led to him getting released by WWE. WWE had a huge storyline set up for him, and he basically ruined it by one, getting drunk, and two, acting like an asshole to a bunch of people. He was a guy who got shot pretty close to the moon, and then all of a sudden started believing his own hype. I think some time away, I think some reflection, I think you can evolve as a person, and hopefully he has. And if that's the case, and if Don Callis agrees that that's the guy who should be the champion, then yeah, I'm all for it. But it has to be a really good match, man. Like, Kenny Omega is going to have to get this guy over. Kenny Omega, I feel like, will have to do most of the heavy lifting here, and it'll be interesting. Now, you brought up showing up on the Impact show, and what were your thoughts on Impact?
I thought it was a good show. I mean, on the heels of Rebellion, a great pay-per-view where you had the debut of somebody that's really, really special. I think that they carried over pretty well. I'm enjoying the feud between Brian Myers and Matt Cardona. I'm enjoying, the top-end stuff. So it was, all in all, a really good show. Obviously, you kick off the show with the brand new Impact champion in Kenny Omega. Now we got to find out who's going to be the number one contender. And it's going to be good. It's going to be who's going to be competing, who's going to be the guy next, and we're going to start to get those answers that we started to tease. Who's going to be the number one contender? And it's going to be great. You start the show off with Chris Bay versus Jake something, and Bay goes over. The debut of William Morrissey, obviously he gets the W in dominating fashion, defeats Spiel, and does a good job. 2 performances in, and obviously you see the guy, like I said, I no more words could be said about a performer that I think should be the top of the company. Taylor Wilde versus Kimber Lee, solid match. I mean, women kind of taking a backseat in my mind on Impact, could do a lot better job. Wilde goes over in this match. You get an X Division Championship match. Josh Alexander takes on Ace Austin, and Alexander goes over to retain his title. Felt like a pay-per-view match. Really solid performance there. Matt Cardona, Brian Myers continuing to, obviously, friends, business partners, they can put on great matches, and Cardona goes over. It was a great wrestling match. Really skillfully done, put together well. You kind of hope that Brian Myers doesn't get now put to the background because he's been taking losses to Cardona, but hey, whatever it is, you have 2 guys there that if they keep getting opportunities to shine, you have no problem seeing and getting invested in both these guys. Cardona goes on, and maybe he elevates. If it's not William Morrissey, maybe you look at Cardona. I'll look more closely at his character development and see where he's at on Impact to see if he's worthy of becoming the number one contender. He might be the transition guy where he gets there but loses. Main event, Eddie Edwards, Sami Callihan. No contest. Not the best way I would have liked it to end, but it was another quality match. These two can just go out there and work. So they rightfully held their worthy spot in the main event. B-plus show, intriguing. Look, guys, Kenny's on board. You're on board. Impact is steadily taking advantage of the opportunities that are given to them with taking advantage of stars, and they got names, and they got a show. So this new direction of Impact is professional, and tune in. B-plus show, good week for Impact.
Now, I think you brought up something really interesting. You said Impact had a pay-per-view-like show, and I think AEW did the same exact thing. I thought Dynamite this week was pay-per-view quality. Now, this was their setup and their go-home show for what's coming next week at Blood and Guts. But I thought AEW show this Wednesday was absolutely fantastic. And while it unfolded, I did notice something, and I'm wondering if you noticed it as well. JR seems to be less of the broadcast. Ever since his WWE slip, I feel like they've kind of dialed him back a little bit, and they're leaning a little bit more heavily on guys like Tony Schiavone, Excalibur. Every now and then, Taz or Don Callis will join the commentary booth. And what you have is you've got JR basically adding in little ancillary things. He doesn't really call the match. JR maybe will pop for something big and will give you a one-liner, but JR is no longer really part of that broadcast that is telling the story in the ring. And I'm not sure how you feel about it. And this might be provocative, but I don't think it is. I'm okay with it. I think the broadcast over the last couple weeks has stepped up, and I think it sounds much, much better with JR being minimalized.
Oh,
what do you think?
I agree. It's just something that, you obviously, you feel for the guy. We've talked about it. He's not in his A game, so you do what you got to do. So I think he has to take a back seat.
Yeah, I think it's time for JR to not so much get faded out, but just kind of let him just kind of be there. But you are minimally involved in what's going on. Now, speaking of a high quality pay-per-view, we had a fantastic, what they deemed a parlay. I have no idea what a parlay means besides for betting and gambling. But we had a fantastic parlay between the Inner Circle and the Pinnacle, where all of the guys lined up across from each other and basically cut promos on each other. The only guys who didn't really cut promos were the big guys. You didn't get anything from Wardlow and you didn't get anything from Jake Hager. Like, those were the only two guys who didn't really cut promos. And honestly, Wardlow cut a pretty good promo last week, but I didn't need to hear him again. And Jake Hager's best without a mic. He's there to look intimidating and be intimidating. I thought this was fantastic. Now, there is a bit of a story coming out about what actually took place here, and that there might actually be some real heat between the Inner Circle and the Pinnacle. So it's going to be interesting to see how this kind of plays out. I'm not sure I'm buying it, but I think it's a great way to captivate viewers and to get people interested in this match. And I think this is going to be a fantastic match. I thought the way these guys showed up, both of them basically had their own interesting entrances. And I thought the promos that they cut were great. I don't know if I've ever been more involved in a feud based off of promos alone. Like, these guys really haven't touched knuckles in a ring at all. This has all been built by this narrative, by coming out and cutting promos into a camera. And then this week they cut promos against each other. And I don't know if I've ever wanted to see a fight so much more than this, and nobody's dusted anything up yet. I thought this was absolutely great. I thought it was fantastic. Again, MJF and Chris Jericho are masterful at telling these stories.
Masterful. And then just like everybody looks at, is that you're not having, and it's been said in all these interviews, you're not having Cody versus Kenny. You're not having Cody versus Chris Jericho. You're making new stars and new feuds, and you're taking advantage of the top end stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're building up multiple people in these storylines. Now, as the match, or as the show came to an end, Darby Allin wrestled, and Sting has gotten quite involved in a lot of Darby Allin's matches. Now, this match was going on against 10 of the Inner Circle, or going on against 10 of the Dark Order, and obviously Dark Order no longer heels. Dark Order very much a faction of faces, which is kind of weird, but it is what it is. And as this match continues on, Darby Allin resorts to some very lowbrow tactics like gouging eyes, ripping a mask. It almost feels like at certain points, Darby Allin is a full-blown heel. I don't know if he's one of those gray characters you were mentioning that WWE likes to give us, but as I'm watching this match unfold, I'm like, this is another week where Darby Allin is really walking that line. And I know we're supposed to see him as a face, but he almost feels like he's a heel. And forever and a day, Sting has never been a heel. Sting has always been a face. So could this be a moment where you got Darby Allin, who's very, very gray, and he was a face, but maybe Sting is a heel. We just don't realize it yet. And remember, Sting is kind of mentoring Darby Allin a little bit. Maybe Sting, Darby Allin end up going full-blown heel coming up. Now, the only issue I have is that they were attacked from behind by Ethan Page and by Scorpio Sky, and both those guys are absolutely heels. But Darby Allin resorting to some heel-like tactics it just makes me question. It makes me pause. I'm just like, what's actually going on here? I don't know. Have you noticed that at all?
Yeah, but that's what we're saying. Intrigue. What's going to happen next? That's the thing, is that could go this way, could go that way. We don't know. We can't definitively state. We can kind of sense where the angles are going, but we don't know. And that's the key. Intrigue, suspense, come back and get the payoff. That's what they're doing successfully. And that's what we're here for.
Yeah, absolutely. They've done a really, really nice job telling these storylines and getting everybody involved in them and keeping you interested, which is fantastic. It's going to be fun to see kind of how this plays out. And I think like a double switch here, right? Like Darby Allin, Sting, all of a sudden becoming heels. I think that would be mind blowing. I think it'd be interesting. It'd be something that we haven't seen before. And that's what AEW likes to try to give us, is stuff we haven't seen before. And I think it'd be really interesting.
Absolutely. I think that, you're starting to see that there's good top end angles, good, the good use of the veterans. And that's what makes for a good 2-hour show. And see where the difference lies between AEW and Raw and WWE. There is no 3-hour lull. It's just 2 hours action packed in and out. You want more. And that's the key. They've realized pretty quickly 3 hours of wrestling might not be in the wheelhouse of this generation's ADD brain. 2 hours, sweet spot. You could do 5 2-hour shows a week and everybody's going to be happy. You do 1 3-hour show and 2 hours and 15 minutes in and you're like, can we turn this shit off? And that's where the difference lies, is that AEW, as long as they stayed at 2 hours, will put on intriguing television because they have enough of a roster and they have enough of relationships. There's so many different, fresh, new ways of doing it. It's simply different. It's a winning strategy. It's absolutely the key. It's a winning strategy all the way around, and I'm so happy that we get to invest in a company that's actually doing something really, really strong that also balances out the grandpa of the wrestling world, the establishment. You got the AEW and NXT, the anti-establishment, and you got the corporate Vince just taking over wrestling. But that's the way it is. All right, cuz, hit me with this week's professional wrestling news and notes. What made your top list?
So a couple of really interesting things kind of occurred this week. John Cena recently took to Twitter to shout out the hardest working guy in WWE, at least in his opinion. And this is something you and I have talked about on a couple of different occasions. Cena stated that awesome does not do The Miz justice. As he tweeted, watch this, at Miz or Mike the Miz is the definition of both passion and perseverance. Underrated only in the eyes of ignorance, the hardest worker I know, an inspiration to me and proof that real success takes earning every inch. Awesome doesn't do you justice. #respect. This is on the heels of the Miz's documentary on the Peacock Network. You watched it. You said it was absolutely great. Me and you had a quick discussion after you let me know that you watched it, and we both agreed. The Miz is a guy who, he is a staple. He is just as integral as Stone Cold and The Rock were in the Monday Night Wars and in the Attitude Era. He is just as integral in this version of WWE as those guys were. He is a workhorse. He's a guy who never takes a day off. On top of that, the guy has been able to parlay what he does in WWE into a ton of other things, whether it be movies, whether it be TV shows, whether it be announcing, or whether it be just showing up on ESPN randomly. The guy is all over the place. He carries the banner for WWE. John Cena used to do that. John Cena left. Somebody needed to pick it up, and The Miz has picked it up. And I don't think he gets enough credit in the eyes of the average wrestling fan. All right, I'm off my soapbox now. Randy Orton and Matt Riddle formed a tag team known as RK Bro on Monday night's episode of Raw. We talked about that a little bit earlier. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. You enjoyed it. We both laughed about it. And they enjoyed a successful debut with a win over Cedric Alexander and Shelton Benjamin. According to Fightful Select, the original plans coming out of WrestleMania 37 called for Matt Riddle to continue his feud with Sheamus over the United States Championship and for Orton to feud with Braun Strowman. Thankfully for us, Randy Orton had different plans, as the decision to pair Orton and Riddle reportedly came about because Randy Orton was in favor of working with Matt Riddle. On last week's Raw, Orton and Riddle faced each other, and Riddle came away with a victory, marking one of the biggest wins of his career, obviously. Fightful Selects went on to say that it was reported that Randy Orton suffered a deep bruise in his right shoulder during the match amid the speculation of the injury, but it wasn't enough to keep him out of action this week. And because of all of that, Randy Orton went to the higher ups and was like, hey, let's put us together. And they came about with this storyline for the RK Bro, which, like I told you before, I'm all in because it was the highlight of Monday Night Raw for me. Now, according to new reports from PW Insider, Adam Pearce has just been given a big backstage promotion as part of WWE's recent corporate shakeup, which saw Mark Carrano and several others fired. Now, other people are moving into other roles as this shakeup kind of continues along. The report states, in an update on changes behind the scene with WWE, PW Insider reported yesterday that in recent weeks, Adam Pearce has moved up in terms of responsibilities behind the scene. We're confirming this morning that Pearce's new title is Director of Live Events. In the past, the role has usually meant overseeing live events and touring, creative, and lineups. So in other signs that WWE is preparing strategies for returning to the road, this would have been a role previously filled by Michael Hayes, who in recent months has been working on producing many of the main event matches and angles for Roman Reigns on SmackDown. So in the case of Hayes putting his expertise elsewhere, there's a bit of a void. That is where Adam Pearce slides in and now takes over. Now, remember, Adam Pearce is basically the general manager without actually being the general manager. He's also taking on more responsibilities and more roles in Vince's company. Now, some AEW news. Interesting stuff coming out. Just found this morning. Tessa Blanchard may have a deal done with AEW very, very soon. It sounds like it is almost complete. We're going to have to wait and see. But as soon as probably next week, if not next week, the week following, Tessa Blanchard could have signed with AEW. Again, AEW really strengthening their women's division. I think AEW does a pretty good job of taking their women's division seriously, unlike companies like WWE. You brought up how Impact, it felt almost like the women have taken a little bit of a backseat. I think AEW does a good job of putting a lot of the top-end women at the very, very front. And we had mentioned earlier that there might be some real heat between the Inner Circle and the Pinnacle. Reports are kind of starting to come out about this. Again, it seemed as though Sean Spears did a interview, and in that interview, he had alluded to there being some real heat. Now, this could just be, again, a story to drive viewers to watch next Wednesday at Blood and Guts, or he could be really kind of lifting the veil here. I'm going to say that it's more fiction than fact. So we'll see how this match plays out, and we'll see what happens. But all in all, I feel like it was a pretty good week of wrestling, and that's all I've got for this week's wrestling news and notes.
Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSCharles. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast, where all the hijinks and hilarity takes place. Anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast, type in Detroit Sports Podcast, and you hit that subscribe button. All our daily content finds you, and you can be all in the know in the world of wrestling, Detroit sports, Michigan athletics. We greatly appreciate everybody's insights, because that was fun. And hey, now you have another reason to watch WWE programming, because at any time, my big head will invade your screen. Not only live, not only in your ear hole, but now digitally, virtually, through screens. You can't escape me. I'm everywhere. I'm ever present. Pretty soon, you know it's coming. NFT Doc, one of one. See me in my chair, opening the microphone and saying Detroit Sports Podcast, one of one NFT, where I, the Doc, will send you for the low, low price, 3 payments of $99.99. If you order now, you can get 1 payment off. 2 payments of $99.99. One of one NFT. I'll send you something of my face twirling around in a virtual glass, and you can have it. That's what it is. I'm omnipresent, and I'm going to come at you in all different various forms. So don't miss out. You could find me.
Bro, I don't want you in any of my holes. Not my ear hole, not my mouth hole, not my bee hole. I don't want you in any of my holes.
Exactly. It's great, man. I love it. Let's talk soon.
Keep it real, brother.